Well, the title might be a little bit unfair. For the most part, I have an extremely well-informed audience, but certainly a lot of people are wrong about the Gender Recognition Act. And thus, a rant is in order. The Gender Recognition Act is a piece of British legislation which allows trans people in Britain to, among other things, apply for a GRC, otherwise known as a Gender Recognition Certificate. A GRC allows you to change the gender marker on your birth certificate and other sort of historical documents like education certificates from male to female or vice versa. It also has other effects. For instance, should you receive a custodial sentence, it does help in getting assigned to an appropriately gendered prison, although that can be done without a GRC, as has been evidenced by recent news stories. Also, before gender equality was brought into the UK, it changed who you could get married to, essentially allowing marriage to people of the now opposite gender and voiding marriages to people of the same gender. Fortunately, that is no longer a thing because of equal marriage, so that's fine. Now, there are a lot of issues with the Gender Recognition Act and the process of acquiring a GRC, and so the Gender Recognition Act is undergoing much overdue reform. There are lots of people opposing this, and for the most part, their reasons are stupid. Now, the main reason that they're wrong is not that they're transphobic nonsense, although, don't get me wrong, for the most part they are transphobic nonsense, but also because they're just inaccurate. The things that people are kicking off about are, for the most part, not actually an element of the Gender Recognition Act at all. Allow me to explain. I, like most trans people in Britain, do not have a GRC. Most people just don't need one. The majority of the things that we care about on a day-to-day basis are covered by the Equalities Act, and you don't need a gender recognition certificate for at all. And so with that in mind, here is a list of some things that I can do without a gender recognition certificate. Number 1. Access transition healthcare. As has been discussed previously on this channel, I do receive hormones on the NHS and am on the waiting list for chest surgery, which I should receive by the end of the year. I do not actually need either of these things to be eligible for a gender recognition certificate, and I also do not need a gender recognition certificate to do any of these things. Medical transition is completely unrelated to the Gender Recognition Act. So, any of these people freaking out about sex change operations for 4-year-olds, I mean, those people are wrong for a whole bunch of reasons, but most relevantly for this video is that the Gender Recognition Act has no impact. Number 2. Changing my name and gender marker on my passport. Any British person can change their name using a deed poll or a statutory declaration, and that includes changing your title, and this would then be reflected on all of your documentation, including your passport. Changing your gender marker on your passport currently requires typically a letter from your doctor, which most gender identity clinics will provide pretty early on in the process, sort of after your initial diagnosis. GRC not required. And finally, number 3. Using whatever bathroom or changing room I damn well like. One of the most common springboards for frothing transphobic rants is this argument that cis men will pose as trans women to get into changing rooms and toilets to pervert women. Firstly, brief segue because I really can't help myself. This really isn't a thing! It just doesn't happen. The only reports I've ever seen of anything along those lines have been not of people actually doing it for pervy reasons, but rather of transphobic people attempting to do it to prove that you could. I think the reason that it doesn't actually really happen is that being trans lines you up for getting just a whole mountain of abuse. Can't help feeling that that's a hell of a price to pay for the dubious thrill of watching people get changed. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. More to the point, the Gender Recognition Act and any amendments to the Gender Recognition Act would have no influence on any of this. All trans people in the UK are entitled under UK anti-discrimination law to use whichever bathroom matches their gender identity, regardless of their appearance, their surgical status, and whether or not they have a gender recognition certificate. If you're freaking out about that, opposing Gender Recognition Act reform is not going to help you. So, that aside, here is what Gender Recognition Act reform could potentially do. It could allow us to change our gender markers on our passports without needing a letter from our doctor. It could allow us to change it to something other than just M or F. One of the things that's being pushed for is recognition of non-binary people, so that you could change it to other or none. The other aim is for people who do want a GRC to be able to get one without the current expensive and humiliating process involved. Currently, if you want a gender recognition certificate, there is a panel of cisgender doctors that you basically have to present documentation and accounts to prove your gender identity before you're allowed a GRC. A GRC, as previously discussed, isn't actually required for most things that matter day to day, but for people who do want one for various reasons, there's no reason for it to be this hard. Anyway, as far as I can tell, those are the main points, and however you cut it, the main things that transphobes get their knickers in a twist over aren't anywhere to be found in the whole conversation. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon.